Alright team, today we're going to make one of my favorite soups. This is a Thai chicken soup with coconut milk. In Thai it's called Tom Kha Gai. The word Tom is soup or a boil, and the word Khai is galangal. In this soup we've replaced the galangal with ginger, and that's a good substitute. For the ingredients, I have my 2 chicken breasts. I sliced them thinly. I sliced them when it was half frozen, so it was much easier. I have my chicken broth. That is for my soup. I have my tomato, and I actually batoned the tomato. I'm not actually going to add the tomato in the soup like the recipe calls for. And I also have a little bit of cilantro and some lime right here for garnishing. I have other lime that I wedge so I could juice. Okay, I have my can of coconut milk, which I open upside down. I shook it really well and then open it upside down. That way, if you're not using it all, you're not dealing with the whole fat that tends to gather in the top. I have my sugar, and then on my tray right here, I have my fish sauce, my curry paste, my lemongrass, which I bruised with my knife, and I'm going to show you in a second how to do that. I got my ginger, and I cut it into smaller pieces. I have all my kaffir lime leaves, and when you open your bag, you should smell them, and they have a really good smell. Some of them are going to be brown, and they were bright green when I gave them to you, but they were frozen, so it's normal oxidation, okay? And then I have shallot that's been diced, and I have a slice, couple of cloves of garlic. Okay. First of all, before we get started, if you have my piece of lemongrass, I cut it in half. You see the other half right here. This half is bruised. This one is not. Just lay it on your board, and take your knife, and just with the top part of the knife, just hit it a couple of times, just enough to bruise it. We're not gonna eat this lemongrass, so we just want to bruise it and put it in the pot to add flavor, and then we'll remove it. Okay. And then I have some canola oil right here. All right, let's get it started. The soup is super easy. Okay. So we're going to put a little bit of canola oil in the pan. I preheated my pan to medium heat. I'm going to add my shallot and my garlic. When you put oil for this soup in here, put more than what you need for the shallot and the garlic, because we're gonna add the curry paste here shortly, and the curry paste will take some of it, okay? I'm gonna wait for this to come up a little bit more in heat, and then we'll add our curry paste. If you're making this soup and you feel like you're trying to stay away from a little bit of spicy, then put half of the red curry paste in there first, and then put the other half if needed. Okay, we can add the curry paste at any point in the soup, but when we put it in at the beginning like this, and we fry it a little bit, the oils of all the peppers and the other lemongrass and the curry leaves that are in there will make it more aromatic and more flavorful. Okay, so I have my shallots and my garlic going, and you guys can see a little bit of steam there. As they get signed, I'm going to take my curry paste and put it in my pan, and as I put it in there, I'm going to take my spoon and smush it with that oil as much as I can, and I'm going to continue moving it. And you'll be able to smell it. You smell the fish sauce coming out of it, and all the aromatics that help make that curry paste will start smelling fairly strong. So if you get your face really close to there, it's gonna make you cough. If you feel like your soup is drying out a little bit, like I feel like my soup is drying out a little bit, feel free to add a little bit more canola, okay? There we go. Add a little bit more oil. And continue smashing that curry in there as much as you can. Alright, now that I have it in there, and all the oil in my pot turned red, like so. Wish you guys could smell this. You smell it at your house. I'm gonna put my lemongrass in there, my ginger, and my kaffir lime. And I want to toast them a little bit so I can start, some of the oils to start coming out, but I don't want to overcook them. Okay, so I'm gonna continue moving them through real quick here. There we go. And then as soon as you start smelling those lime leaves really strong, let's add our stock. Okay. Now before we add our stock, we're gonna turn it up to high. So we're gonna chuck our pan, and then immediately start adding stock. When you add the stock, make sure that you're scraping your pot, okay? And we're kind of deglazing that pan, and we're getting all those goodies off the bottom of the pan, right? That's called the fond. We wanna get all the fond. That's where all the flavors at. Okay. Let me get that taken care of. I notice that I just pour a little bit in there, and I'm scraping so I can actually work in the pot without having too much stock. Now, a lot of this stuff is really big because we're going to remove it, okay? The idea here is to build this broth very, very flavorful and strain, okay? So you're going to need another pot and a strainer when you're making this soup. My liquid came to a boil, so now I can do a second addition of stock. Okay. While it's coming to a simmer, go ahead and add your fish sauce. Add about 2/3 of it from what we gave you in your kit. You can always add more, but I don't know if you guys know, but fish sauce is basically drippings from fermented anchovies, and it's really salty and it's really strong. Don't let it get onto you or your clothes, or you smell like rotten fish for the rest of the day. Okay, so just make sure that you put some in there, but we can always add more if we need to. Okay, I'm gonna mix it really well, and then I am going to add the sugar. Okay, and I usually just add a little tiny bit. I don't want it too sweet, and then I can always add more. Okay, so I'm just gonna go about, I call that a teaspoon and a half. And then we're gonna let this dissolve and all these flavors marry together, okay? Now I'm going to bring this to a simmer, and then I'm gonna let it simmer for about 15 minutes so I can get as much flavor off of this aromatics as possible, okay? Alright team, it's been about 15 minutes. My broth is a nice simmer. I tasted it. It's really nice and strong. It might need a little bit of sugar. You'll notice in your recipe that it tells you to add the coconut milk and then simmer it. I don't like doing that because I believe the fat on the coconut starts separating and it doesn't give you a very good color on your soup. So you'll see that we're making this soup a little bit different than what the recipe calls for. Okay, now I have the broth is ready. I have another pot with a strainer, and I'm just gonna switch pots. I'm gonna put the next pot on high so it starts heating up that metal, and then I'm going to strain my soup by just simply pouring it through the strainer. you'll see, try to get as much liquid out of that as possible. And we have all these goodies that were our aromatics. Aromatics are, we've extracted as much flavor as we can from them. If we continue cooking it, we would actually start depleting the amount of flavor that we have in there. Think of this aromatics the same way that we think of a sachet, where we put our bay and thyme, parsley, all that stuff about an hour before the dish is done. This soup is not going to take that much longer to cook, so we don't want to continue cooking it and then lose all that flavor. Instead, we have it here ready to go. Now, what I like to do is keep this liquid fairly hot. If you keep it low and you add the chicken, some of the impurities will come to the top and it'll foam up and it won't be very good. Okay, if we keep it on high, we should be able to avoid that. I have my coconut milk right here. I have my lime right here. So we're gonna squeeze about a quarter of a lime in there. A lot of the soups that we're making this week is all about balance. So, and you'll notice that a lot of things, even though the recipe calls for a certain amount, that's just a guidance. So I add a little bit less than what it needs, and I taste it, and then I'll know if it needs more later on. Okay, so we have that lime right there. My hand's cleaned up, and I'm going to take my coconut milk and I'm going to pour it in here. 1 can should be exactly what you need of coconut milk. If you have fat, stop to the bottom of the can because the fat is going to rise, and I open my can upside down. Make sure you scrape it off. If you do not need the whole can, then make sure you mix it well. Go in there with a spoon and mix it well before you use any of the coconut milk. Okay? It should give you this milky liquid right here, and the red fat on the top is the fat from the coming off the curry paste, and that is normal. Okay? Now we're gonna take this liquid and bring it to a boil one more time. And then we'll start adding the chicken. Turn around. It should take about maybe 1 more minute. And we will be there. You should be able to smell the kaffir lime leaf a lot. And this is gonna end up being like a sweet and sour soup with a little bit of spice. But although it's a broth soup, is just a different way to make a broth. It's actually a very quick way to make a flavorful broth, which I feel like much more flavorful than some that take hours. Okay, I think we're really good here. I'm starting to see some bubbles. I got my chicken right here. I am not putting salt on my chicken because I'm using a lot of fish sauce to season it. And you treat it kind of the same way as you would treat seasoning with soy sauce. So there will be plenty of salt in here. So don't feel like your soup is not gonna taste any good because there's no salt on your chicken. Now, when you put the chicken in here, sorry about that, put it a little bit at a time and move it around so the pieces don't stick together. And you want it to be boiling because you're adding ice cold meat into this broth, okay? And we want to separate the pieces and continue adding until we have it all in there. And you all got 2 chicken breasts. I think that's the right amount of meat for this soup. So just avoid pouring any of the liquid that you have in your container into here, okay? I'm just gonna keep breaking it apart, moving it around. The thinner you slice the chicken, the better. If your chicken is completely thawed out, it might give you a harder time slicing it, so cubing it might be the way to go for you. Strain any liquid. Strain any liquid. Just put it in here. Here. Alright, looks like we have all our chicken in here. Alright, so important things. I'm gonna let this come back to a boil. I'm gonna turn it down to a simmer. This is gonna cook 3 to 5 minutes, somewhere in there. But most importantly, time is not gonna tell me, but the doneness of the chicken is gonna tell me. That's what I was gonna say. This soup is done or it's not done. After, when we come back, I will season it and we'll taste it. I'll tell you what the flavor profile is, and we'll go from there. Alright team, it's been about 4 minutes. My soup is simmering. You should have a little bit of foam, and the foam is white. If your foam is a different color, like a darker color, go ahead and skim that off the soup. We don't need that. That just means that your chicken cooked a little bit slow, and it's not going to, it just didn't coagulate fast enough. Okay? I have my tasting spoon right here. I've already tasted it a couple of times. Tastes pretty good. I feel like it needs a little bit more sweet and a little bit more salt. Instead of salt, I'm going to use fish sauce, and I'm just going to drizzle a little tiny bit here. Remember, you can always add more if you need to. And I'm going to give it a pinch of sugar. And we're going to give it one more mix. And we should be there. Okay? You will notice that I did not put the tomatoes in the soup. Okay? I didn't put the tomatoes in the soup because I believe, although it gives some flavor, it changes the texture of them and they get too mushy. So, there's a quick version of my opinion is fact. Keep your tomatoes to the side and then garnish your soup with your tomatoes, okay? Taste it one more time. I think we're perfect. When you taste the soup, you should be able to taste sweet coconut. Then you should be able to taste the kaffir lime, the lemongrass, all the sour ingredients that went into the soup. And then after that, you should taste a little bit of the heat from the curry paste. We can turn this off now. And I'm going to slide this to the side a little bit. Grab a bowl, a ladle. And then when you serve this soup, just like any of the other soups that we've been serving, make sure you grab some of the solids. Okay? And always scrape your ladle on your pot so you don't drip. Notice how I have a pile of chicken, and I'm going to try to keep that pile of chicken in the center of the bowl. Okay, I'm going to grab a little bit more and keep it in the center of the bowl. And then now I'm going to go back and grab some of the broth. The broth comes in. Okay, maybe a little bit more for this bowl. That looks pretty good there. Then I have my garnish bowl right here, and I have a piece of lime, some cilantro sprigs, and the tomato that I cut into batons. Now I'll take this tomato I like a fairly good amount of tomato, and I pile it right on top of the chicken. Okay, and that's gonna give me a variance on color. All right, and it's also gonna give me a little bed for me to take this nice cilantro and put it right here. And then I have this piece of lime that I cut, and if you notice, I cut the lime kind of in a weird way, just because it's easier to squeeze this way. So when you're serving limes, you should always cut them this way. And then I'm gonna place that guy right there. And push it down a little bit, and there we go. We got coconut chicken Thai soup with lime and cilantro. All right, enjoy, guys.